Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Of October 1066.
Dan? It's Dan. What's up? So, question, guys. Do you think that if Harold Godwinson shoots, look, I'm not great. William the Conqueror, William Godwinson, and then do you think if he, you know how he had to go, they had to go, the English, they had to go fight in the north and then quickly go back to the south and fight William, right? Do you think if he didn't have to go fight up north, right? And do you think William the Conqueror still would have won? I stuttered a lot, but I think I got my question across. Curious what you think. Let's go. Which one's better? Display, window. Display. They're both kind of bad. What the heck?
Two armies stood opposite each other on Senlac Hill, just a few miles inland from the English town of Hastings. On one side stood the English king, Harold Godwinson, and on the other, a Norman invader, William. When I mention 1066 to people, you can see that they immediately think about the Battle of Hastings, maybe King Harold being shot in the eye by an arrow. But so few realise that the Battle of Hastings is actually a final chapter in a year of astonishing turmoil. A year that saw three men vying for the throne of England, two foreign invasions, and only one man left at the end, crowned victorious.
I heard everything. I don't have to rewind. I love me some Dan Snow.
Now I'm going to travel across the country to see the places where history was made. With the help of experts, I'll explore the claims of the three men who were fighting for the throne. Find out exactly what happened on the battlefield.
This isn't your classic Hollywood shield wall battle. This is a dynamic battle.
William needs Harold to be dead.
And decode a startling survivor from the period, the Bayeux Tapestry.
What it shows of the battle is quite extraordinary.
I'll discover the story behind the battles and the tales from inside the walls of power, from England's most famous year. It was a succession crisis like no other. 1066 saw three rival warlords separated by hundreds of miles and savage seas, battling it out on English soil for the crown. It saw the end of the age of Viking conquest, the end of Anglo-Saxon England, and the arrival of the Norman French regime. We're still living with the consequences of that fateful year. This is the story of 1066.
It's even a year that some Americans might like, that sounds familiar. Maybe I'm being a little too... Okay.
On the 13th of October, the eve of the battle, the two camps made their final preparations. William was concerned that Harold was planning a nighttime surprise attack on his camp, and he kept his men-at-arms awake and alert just in case. William spent all night, we're told, praying and contemplating. Those same sources, perhaps slightly biased, tell us that the English spent the night, by contrast, drinking and partying. Whatever the truth of that, it's pretty clear that both William and Harold realised that the following day would see a clash that would decide the fate of the kingdom. Historian Mark Morris is an expert on the Norman conquest and can tell me how the dramatic battle unfolded. So Mark, we're down in the valley now at Hastings. I always think down here, it can feel a bit flat here, but when you stay all the way down here...
I just have to ask it so it gets off my mind. So if William the Conqueror lost and Harold Godwinson won, then that means that the 100 Years' War doesn't happen, right? Because the 100 Years' War had a lot to do with, like, Norman Anglo-Saxon, like, claim to the throne, right? So, yeah, I just wonder what you think history would have changed if it went the other way.
On the Norman conquest, and can tell me how the dramatic battle unfolded. So Mark, we're down in the valley now at Hastings. I always think down here, it can feel a bit flat here, but when you stay all the way down here, it is a good old slope, that, isn't it?
It is fairly steep. I mean, it's been levelled out by the monks over the centuries, or the medieval centuries at any rate. So it has been landscaped, and it would have been steeper at the top where the abbey is now. Look at that wall there and where the modern school stands. That rises about 20 feet. That is the top of the hill, that terrace there. So it was a lot steeper.
What, so William's coming up from the coast here?
William's coming up from his camp at Hastings, which is about 6 or 7 miles that way, and surprising Harold, who assembles his army on the ridge, as I say, where you can see Battle Abbey is now. Harold seems to have a favourite strategy, which is kind of, ta-da! You know, he surprised the Vikings, Hardrada, in the north and won that battle by surprise. So he's hoping to do the same thing here with William. But William's reconnaissance is very good. His spies report that Harold is getting near, and William on the morning.
Question, guys: was it William's sailing to England? Was he like really like he wanted to go but he couldn't because of the winds weren't and like weren't in his favor, or am I thinking of something else? Like he had to stay in France.
Morning of the very good. His spies report that Harold is getting near, and William on the morning of the 14th of October marches out to engage Harold. So neither of them perhaps would have picked this precise site. It's not ideal for either of them. William because he's rushing up the hill, Harold because we're told it was a narrow place, so he can't deploy his whole army.
We are down here where the Normans and the French were lined up. How does William, Duke of Normandy, go about getting the English off that ridge?
Well, we're told the battle begins with a volley of arrows and projectiles being launched by the Normans, so he tries to soften them up with his archers, and then it's the infantry and then the cavalry riding up the hill to try and break through that shield wall. Told that the fighting is very bloody and that the English are throwing things back. It is essentially a stalemate. That's the most you could take away from the sources, that they're trying to break through that line and the line is holding. And it produces a very unusual battle. That was, again, something said by contemporaries, a very unusual battle because one side just stood still and kind of took it on the chin, while the other side charged up the hill and tried to smash through. So it's two utterly different ways of approaching battle, which makes Hastings such an exciting and unusual battle to investigate.
And that's why you get this really remarkable day-long attritional...
Kind of weird question, but question. If you were to take a Roman army from 1,000 years prior, would it have been a good fight? Because imagine going back 1,000 years and fighting an enemy from 1,000 years and it's still being a fight, like it not being like, well, you're going to get destroyed, right? So it's so crazy how little they kind of progressed, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, it must be a stalemate. It's the Norman sort of, the Norman waves breaking relentlessly on this sort of Saxon shoreline, but failing to have any impact.
And then at some stage, though, we're told that the English foolishly charged down the hill towards the...
Well, yeah, bring us on to the crucial point of the battle, because the crucial point that all the sources agree on, so the detailed sources are the Carmen, William of Poitiers and the Bayeux Tapestry, they all agree on the fact that at some point the Normans started to run away. They disagree as to whether it was feigned or whether it was real. The Normans start to run away, and the English follow them down the hill, as you say. And then the Normans wheel round and turn it to their advantage. Now, it's impossible to unpick which source is right there. I think the most credible one is perhaps the Normans tried to feign it. The Carmen says a flight that was started off as a ruse, as a trick, then became a real one as it went wrong. The Normans pull that off, and they managed to sort of encircle the groups of Anglo-Saxons who have come down from their ideal position on the top of the hill and pick them off. And it's that breaking of the shield wall that does for Harold and the Anglo-Saxons.
Sort of want to go back.
So the Battle of Hastings is quite a drawn-out affair in the Bayeux Tapestry, and what it shows of the battle is quite extraordinary, really, because there's there's different sorts of sequences. To start with, there's quite a lot that's shown of the kind of movements of the forces. And then the tapestry just becomes completely chaotic. You've got horses falling over people. You've got people being chopped up. The lower borders become littered with the dead.
But one scene stands out among all the others. Harold getting his arrow to the eye.
So eventually...
Dang it, I would have sounded so smart. I was going to ask, is this the one where the battle where someone gets something in the, like in the head or the eye or something, and they have to create a new, oh my God, a new, not dissection. What is the word? Surgery, a new surgery tool. That like they like go in and then they like can like screw it to take hold of the arrowhead and then pull it out. I don't think it ended well, but still pretty smart.
We come to this point where we see this individual beneath this inscription, Harold, who appears to be holding something, a projectile, at his eye. Now, what's fascinating about this part of the tapestry is it's been heavily restored, and you can see that in the lower borders. And some of the threads as well, they're kind of lighter colours. And there's been some scientific analysis done on the tapestry here, which shows how much this has been restored. So what we've got here is difficult to know how much is original and how much has sort of been made up. And that becomes quite fascinating when we think of the arrow in the eye. Because in the early drawings of the Bayeux Tapestry that were made soon after it was found, so in the early 1700s, this figure of Harold does not have an arrow in his eye. It seems like he may be carrying a spear, or a spear might be going past him.
I don't know what it is. It's going to be kind of hard to explain this, but I never really think about, like, I either think, okay, it's an untouched piece of history, right? And that it's either an untouched piece of history that hasn't been altered, or someone in the past, like, 100 years has altered it, right? For some reason, it doesn't go through my mind that, you know, that it can be altered by people all the way up until then. That probably was confusing, but I had to say it. And I hope that, does that make sense? Like the pyramids, like how did they survive like 2 world wars and then...
So Mark, we've staggered up the hill now. We're next to the school, and this is where the battle reached the...
Obviously, it's not like Egypt was not a very big place in World War II to be fighting. There was definitely some fighting in Egypt in World War II, right? Rommel? But just thank God for all the things that weren't destroyed, and it makes me think and sad about all the things that probably were destroyed and aren't here.
So Mark, we've staggered up the hill now. We're next to the school, and this is where the battle reached the climax.
Once the shield wall has holes in it, then really that was the English's primary advantage. You know, that was the fact that was what was keeping them alive, the fact that their shields were all locked together. As soon as they've got holes in it, then the Norman cavalry have the advantage of being able to ride quickly among them and pick them off in small groups. Even then, though...
I have to go back. I'm going back like 20 seconds.
To reach the climax.
Once the shield wall has holes in it, then really that was the English's primary advantage. You know, that was the fact that was what was keeping them alive, the fact that their shields were all locked together. As soon as they've got holes in it, then the Norman cavalry have the advantage of being able to ride quickly among them and pick them off in small groups. Even then, though, William needs Harold to be dead. You know, this isn't a war that can be solved by negotiation. This is a succession dispute. He doesn't just need Harold defeated, he needs him eliminated. The turning point, the thing that decides the battle, all the sources agree, as you'd expect, is the death of King Harold, you know, the elimination of one of the 2 contenders for the throne.
How do you think he died? Are we allowed to talk about the arrow thing?
Well, the arrow in the eye we all remember from, you know, when we're little children, because it's famously depicted on the Bayeux Tapestry. So we see it on, you know, lunchboxes or key rings or, you know, tea towels, what have you. And that image of Harold sort of grasping the shaft of an arrow that's lodged in his eye socket is kind of very hard to get beyond. But the problem with the tapestry, as I always say, is that it's an artistic source.
More reliable, you think, is the Norman hit squad, knights that just go in, punch the protection around him and kill him.
You're referring, of course, to the account in the Carmen, which is a poem with all the problems that that entails, but it is very closely contemporary. The Carmen suggests he was done in by a dedicated Norman death squad, including William himself.
Oh, you threw me off there. I'm like, what? It's over? Subscribe?
And this is the spot where it almost certainly happened, on Van Ilkenstjorde, as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says.
So Harold, King of England, is dead.
Yep.
What next?
Chronicle says. Where it almost certainly happened, on Van Ilkenstjorde,
Ilkenstjorde.
as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says.
So Harold, King of England, is dead.
Yep.
What next?
Well, then you get into the stage of the battle which is the aftermath, the rout. We're told by the sources that the killing continues into the darkness. Mostly it's Englishmen falling. I mean, you've got to imagine this place is covered with dead bodies by this point. But really, in terms of the broader picture after that, this is the fall of Anglo-Saxon England.
This field lay strewn with the dead and dying, the mutilated bodies of the flower of England. As the sun set at the end of that long day, William rested. He may have even allowed himself a celebration. He'd won the battle. He could now expect the nobility of England to take the knee to him as their new ruler. But the story of 1066 had one more twist. There was one last hope for Anglo-Saxon England.
Edgar Atheling has two chances to become king. First of all, January 1066, he's passed over quite quickly by Harold. But the second time in October, it seems to be a far more viable contender. Edgar's grandfather, Edmund Ironside, had ruled for about 7 months in 1016. Edgar was actually called Adeling, or Clito, the Latin form, which is throne-worthy. And he's the only contender in 1066 who's seen as throne-worthy according to contemporary sources. He attracts a lot more political support. The citizens of London have often been crucial in deciding competing succession claims beforehand, so their support is really important. They back the side of Edgar Atheling at that point.
I don't want to be too simplistic here, but wouldn't they just march on and confront any other army? And so, well, I guess it's tricky even if you control everything to have, it would be better to have the civilian population on your side, which would mean that would make sense. Never mind. I answered my own question.
William waited. He sat there on the south coast, recuperating, waiting for the great lords of England to submit to him. He'd killed their king. He'd won the crown on the field of battle. But no word came. And in the end, his impatience got the better of him once more. He marched his army, first to Dover, then to Canterbury, forcing them to submit. Then he arrived here at the south end of London Bridge, the city there on the north bank. Londoners massed here to stop him crossing. It was the last stand of Anglo-Saxon England. In the end, their resistance was futile. Thanks for watching this video on the History Hit YouTube channel.
Thank you, Dan.
You can subscribe right here to make sure you don't miss any of our great films that are coming out. Or if you already...
I've been subbed since they had like 20K subs. They're at 502. They'll be at 1 million. They're a great channel. History Hit, very professional. Big budget. Cool video. I'd really like to know what you guys would think if Harold Godwinson didn't have to fight 2 armies back to back. If he just like was prepared for William. And if William did not succeed or would not succeed in that scenario, then I wonder how that would change history. One being, I don't think the 100 Years' War would happen. Really interesting. I hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you learned something or can teach me something or both. And I'll see you guys next time, all right? Bye, guys.